A mature fruit tree can be overwhelming with abundance. Fruit trees were the first thing I wanted to plant when we moved to this place in 2021. I had dreamed of having a small orchard or at least some espaliered fruit trees, but at my old suburban homestead, there just wasn't nearly enough sun or space to make it worth the investment of putting trees there. So when we moved here, I ended up planting this peach tree, a plum, a European pear, 3 apple trees in April of 2022. And since then, I've just been watching and waiting. There've been a couple of apples here and there, and we got about 2 dozen peaches last year. The squirrels got the rest. Now there is a literal glut of peaches ready. Well, mostly ready. I'm picking them in batches so I can process them 1 bushel at a time. I'd rather pick the first round slightly underripe and not lose any to rot on my kitchen floor. They do continue to ripen inside as long as they're picked really close to ripe. These peaches are so juicy, so sweet, and completely beautiful. No worms, no scabs, just perfection. One of our apple trees produced well this year, considering its small stature. This tree is only 3 years old, so I'm really impressed. The variety is called Frostbite, and it's so sweet and juicy. This food forest hill has really been producing a ton of food and flowers already. I had to go get the kids to harvest these because the harvest is the most exciting part. They unfortunately got cold though and went inside halfway through, but I'm not going to pretend I was upset about getting a turn to harvest. The other apple trees I have growing on this hill are primarily for making ciders, though they all taste good fresh. And in a few more years, this 40-foot by 20-foot hillside food forest is going to produce more than we can possibly eat ourselves. Our little suburban homestead will soon be a source of community food security. We're already pawning off peaches to our neighbors this year. Our raspberries have started producing well again after a weird summer of disease and just lack of production. It's really nice to have these sweet snacks again. They're so expensive to buy in the store, and we almost never did buy them even before growing our own. These are the kids' favorite garden snack, and they love helping to pick them. But when I send the kids out to harvest raspberries, it's magically like there were no raspberries on the plants. They eat them all before they even make it inside, which is a good thing. I grow 2 varieties of raspberries, well, actually 3. There are 2 red summer-bearing kinds, and then there's this yellow fall-bearing. And so the fall one really puts on a show of berries in September and October, even through to November. And then the red ones that are summer-bearing, they just sort of trickle in berries throughout the summer, starting in late June or early July. But they all continue going right up until the frost knocks out the plants. I stumbled across 2 little cauliflowers starting on a plant I had already harvested from on the food forest hill. And of course, I had to get footage of a cute sleeping bee and a zucchini flower. The beans were, like many things, slower to get going this year. These plants that I'm harvesting from now were sown in July, so they were timed for a fall harvest. I also sowed some that I was harvesting in July, so I sowed them earlier in the summer or late spring, but that whole row got wiped out by a rust, a fungal disease. So I was thankful that I staggered my planting. I did a succession sowing of bush beans. And luckily my pole beans they're like an indeterminate version of a bean, so they're still growing and they're still producing. These bush beans usually put on about 3 to 4 weeks of production, and then they wind down and stop producing. Tomatoes have also been a bit slower this year, but now we're getting enough to make a bit of salsa and soup for canning. We're still not tired of fresh tomato sandwiches either, so it's hard to decide what to do with the tomatoes as they come in. My favorite variety for sandwiches this year has been Gold Medal, but Brandywine is a close second. I've been working on seed saving strategically for my healthiest plants to try to get some lovely heirlooms that are adapted to my conditions and maybe a little more disease resistant than their predecessors. Fungal diseases are a tomato plant's biggest threat, and they are the reason why I have my tomatoes in these tall raised beds this year. Ideally, they'd be closer to the ground so you can let them grow much, much taller and just take advantage of that vertical space. But there was a fungal disease in the soil where they were growing, and this is the only place that I could put them. My Florida weave trellis also just wasn't perfect for the varieties that I'm growing. The tomatoes themselves were well over 2 pounds in some cases, and they were just too heavy for the Florida weave trellis. That said, I didn't lose any plants to breakage, so I guess it did work. I just didn't like how saggy it started to look later in the season. This is that gold medal tomato. It's definitely a 2.5 pounder. There are probably another like 100 peaches on this tree, at least another bushel, and they're perfect peaches. I so foolishly bought a flat of peaches from a local produce supplier because last year our peach tree definitely did produce, but it got wiped almost clean by the squirrels. At the end of the day, we got a basket, maybe 24 peaches that we got to eat. So I thought this year, I know it said a lot more fruit, but we're probably still gonna have a lot of loss. So when I could get seconds of Freestone peaches, like the quality that they wouldn't sell at a store, I could get it for a better price, I went ahead and got a flat of that. And so I already have 12 pints of peach jams of various recipes. I have a bunch of peach fruit leather. My kids go through fruit leather like crazy in the fall and winter for school lunches. I froze 3 gallons of peaches just from what I bought, the $30 of peaches that I purchased as seconds. And now I'm gonna have at least 2 bushels to deal with from our tree, which is an amazing problem to have. And that's kind of the way it is as a gardener. In the early years, you really struggle with pest pressure. The insects are dominating over their predators. There's less bird species attracted to your garden, less predatory insects. For people like me who are in the suburbs or who are in cities, the wildlife is existing in kind of like this wildlife food desert where there's just parking lots around them. And so if you start a garden that has food in it, those things are gonna flock to you. It's a long process over many years to cultivate a space that produces enough for you and for nature, for everybody else, or for you and your neighbors in your community. And for us, one of the things that's really long-term is changing people in your neighborhood, in your community, getting other people to start growing. And since I even moved in here, I've seen a resurgence, or not a resurgence, but like a new blossoming of this interest in wildlife gardens. There are maybe 7 yards on my street, which is not a huge street. It's like a, it starts here and it goes around a corner and it ends here. There's like 5 to 7 yards that have purposefully planted a bunch of native wildlife haven plants in their front gardens. And I don't even know what's going on in the backyards. So there's definitely been an uptick in that. And that's going to take the wildlife pressure off of me and my food in my garden, because there's other sources of food for this wildlife. And how did I get on this tangent? Well, I was talking about the peach tree and how when I first started nurturing my fruit trees, it was very much like, this is the only fruit that I have. I need to keep it safe. I was a helicopter mom over the trees. And it was really heartbreaking when I came out to half the fruit being taken or like nibbled right down and left on the plant. This year though, it's showing me that fruit trees, this is a 5-year-old tree. It's not that old. Like, this is its 5th year. They will grow enough for everybody. And a mature fruit tree is a magical thing when it comes to food security for a community. A mature fruit tree can be overwhelming with abundance. If you want to read something that I wrote about keeping your garden, your food crops safe from critters, from rabbits, squirrels, deer, that kind of thing specifically, check out my Substack. I'll link it in my description below. I just started out on Substack and I will tell you why. I'm pretty passionate about this. So when I became a content creator, I really wanted to be able to make money at it because it takes a lot of time. And while I have 2 businesses, I have a business that brings in a bit of an income for me through research and evaluation work in a related sector, like I'm working with food security and regenerative agriculture and that kind of topic. But that doesn't bring in a whole lot of money because I spend most of my time working in the garden and preserving food and documenting that journey and writing up articles to share that knowledge with people, making YouTube videos to share what I'm learning and teach other people to grow food. So it's really important to be able to make a little bit of money at that if I want to keep teaching and sharing through these avenues, through these platforms. The sad thing is, it seemed to me that the only way to do that was to sell out. That, you know, there's Google AdSense, which I do make a bit of ad revenue on YouTube now, but like in a good month, it's $100. Like, it's not much. Other than that, what content creators recommend for making money is through sponsorships. So you get companies to sponsor you, you do an ad placement for them essentially, you talk about how great their product is, and you convince other people to buy it. And you get paid for making an ad. And I hate advertisements. My grandma always told me that hate is a very strong word and you should not use it unless it is actually called for. It is called for. It's so impossible to get away from all this consumerism when ads are being shoved down our throats. And so I've been torn because I love the fact that we humans can go out and be teachers and find creative ways to get paid for that through sponsorships, through ads. I think that's really valuable. And to just be a creative person and to write and produce videos and find your own way to make an income at that. It's awesome. But I friggin' hate ads so much. Back to Substack. Substack is pretty cool in that it's not about an algorithm. It's not about ads. It's just a place where either the writer can ask for money up front for people to be able to read their stuff, or you can offer your resources for free, and then the readers can choose to sponsor that creator. And I really like that model. And I know I'm going to need a lot of subscribers on Substack in order to find enough people who are willing and able to subscribe and support me in a little way over on that platform to actually make a dent in like monthly expenses. But I think it's a really cool opportunity. And so I'm giving it a shot. I also love writing. I started the Hobby Homestead 2016. So, almost 10 years ago. I started the Hobby Homestead as a blog and on Instagram, but I had a website back then on WordPress and I wrote articles. And it wasn't so much how-to articles, how to grow this thing or an instruction for this. It was just my daily life and experiences on my suburban homestead and the lessons that I was learning along the way. But then grad school got really busy and heavy and I sort of dropped it. And picking it up again now as a business, I started a new fresh website and I've been posting articles to that, but they're kind of like how-to resources and articles and doesn't leave a lot of space for creative writing and blogging. And it's the same thing with YouTube, where I wanted to start out doing instructional videos because I thought that's what was needed and what was valuable, but I can't get away from the vlogging style where I just take the camera around and talk to people while I'm in my garden and show you what I have growing. And that's what we're going to do today. So I hope that you enjoyed that opening footage of harvesting. I am going to harvest my elderberries right now because they are overdue for a harvest. Things have been busy. I did bag some of them a while back. Just a homemade insect netting. I cut into squares and tied them up over some of them. But I've found that the birds haven't been competing with me for these elderberries, which is strange because in the past they have definitely gone straight for the elderberries. So there are a couple things worth mentioning about elderberries. One is that there are different species of elderberry. This is an American elderberry. I can put the scientific name in the captions because I forget it. I think it's like Sambucus americana. Let's test my memory and see if that's right later. This one is not safe for water bath canning. I think unless you found a recipe that added a ton of sugar and acidified it, and then you could can a elderberry jam or something. But there's another kind that grows on the west coast of North America. And it's a blue elderberry, and apparently that one you can it's really acidic and you can water bath can it. There's also a red elderberry, which has the highest concentration of toxins of all the elderberry varieties, and it is considered toxic. You don't want to use it medicinally or cook with it. This is the American one. And so what I typically do with my elderberries actually is use them for the flowers. I make elderberry cordial, elderberry ciders. We've done the hard ferment, and I also do it with simple syrups. So I'll jar them up with a bunch of sugar, and they're amazing poured over bubbly water. My mom once made some hard cider with elderflowers, and it was better than any champagne I've ever had. It was phenomenal. So I'm always kind of after that taste of elderflower champagne. Haven't been able to perfectly recreate it yet though. I'm sure there's lots of methods for picking the berries. It's always going to be slightly painstaking. And if you don't want to just be outside doing this, you can always snip the whole floret head off and then pull the berries off once you get inside. There's probably ways to rake the berries off. The stems and the leaves of elderberries have a higher concentration of the toxin in them. I forget what it's called, cyanide something, I don't know. Not great. The berries have a bit of it, and so you don't eat them raw, but when you cook them, you render that compound inert, so it becomes safe to eat them. Elderberries are a bit controversial because as a health food, they're touted as this miracle food, and I give my kids elderberry syrup when they're feeling sick, when they start to come down with a bug. There's mixed evidence on whether it works, elderberry syrup, to help you heal faster from what ails you. But it's mixed. It's not no evidence, it's mixed evidence. So I go ahead and use it when they're sick, if I have access to elderberries like I do. It also tastes really good. So one of my favorite ways to use elderberry syrup is just like with the elderflower syrup, put it in bubbly water, and it's a delicious drink. It's a good way to have mocktails when you feel like having a cocktail. If you have any genius ways for harvesting elderberries, please let me know in the comments. This variety here is called Bob Gordon, and I bought this elderberry bush or tree. The rest I got from my mom's old farm. So they're just the native variety. They're not a cultivar or anything. And this one has just slightly more plump berries, but I haven't found that they're hugely different. Yeah, okay, once I get them into the basket, I realize they're quite a bit more plump. These ones are not quite ready, so I'm gonna leave these on the plant. There's some back here that are. Okay, pretty good. It's a pretty good basket full. You can see in there. Yeah, not bad. It's actually kind of sad to see the elderberries done for the season. They've provided us with beautiful flowers earlier in the season, and then the berries have been gorgeous also, like flowers of their own kind out here in the garden. And now they're gone until next year. Left some for the birds, but they're the ones that are starting to look scraggly that the birds have already been eating off of. Well, I'm gonna head inside. I've got some coffee to finish, and it's already afternoon and I haven't finished my coffee yet. I have a basket of elderberries to process now, and I have so many peaches and so many tomatoes to go process. So it's gonna be a busy afternoon in the kitchen. Thanks for coming along with me today. I hope that you enjoyed watching the harvest, and I hope that you're also getting a good harvest now that the growing season is starting to wrap up and plants have had enough time to thoroughly grow and produce their fruit. I really hope things have worked out for you this season. I know it was a tough season for many. And as a reminder, I have my Substack available for reading if you want to go subscribe to that. I will leave the link in the show notes below, and also just on my channel page, so you can find that anytime you want. Happy harvesting, happy preserving. I hope that you'll come and grow with us.